hopefully it's something that you can have some new learnings and takeaways from. So yeah, it's okay. Maybe some of you can't turn on your cam, no worries. Just find a quiet corner and then yeah, just notebook and a pen, and then you can enjoy the session. Yeah. So let me share my screen and let's get started right away. Give me a second. Let me share sound and okay, so you guys can see my slides. I hope you can. Okay, I see Krish nodding. Krish is the only one who is giving me attention. But anyways, thank you, Krish, my lovely CC buddy. So as you guys know from the agenda, the session is going to talk about sales minimum and your first approach to companies. So on the face of it, it's going to be, like a very hardcore mini session, but I've got to try and keep it more engaging and at the same time try to make it more conversational so that you guys don't feel like an info overload, and I don't want your brains to get overheated. So no worries, we're going to take things slow and hopefully you guys can learn more about sales prospecting and how to approach companies properly. So as is the tradition for every session, I'm going to introduce myself first. Like you guys might be wondering, who is this really handsome gentleman delivering a session for you? Okay, so my name is Utso Roy, and you can call me Roy. I think that's easier name for you to remember. So just like some background about my ASIC journey. So currently I'm a BD growth hacker for AP, and I'm also MCVP PDPR of ASIC in Hong Kong. And previously I was an LCP, and then in my membership and tier year, I was in OGV. So by ASIC standards, I'm quite old, like it's my 4th year already. And yeah, I think most of you probably are either entering your 4th year or maybe even younger. So it's always good to see new babies and new faces in the commission. I think some pretentious besties already have tried this trick before. So in case you guys want to follow my Instagram, you can feel free to do so. You can hit me a message later and yeah, we can keep in touch to talk more about BD. So before we start, just basic expectation. I've already told it once, but I can also remind you guys. So because it's going to be a bit informative and we're going to cover some important content. So it's important you guys have a good background, and then you can turn on your camera, grab a notebook and pen, and also proactively engage in the session. And in case you can't like turn on your audio, you can feel free to use the chat box, and I'm going to monitor what you guys are saying. So yeah, just let us know your thoughts so that it's not just you guys listening to me all throughout. So I just want to start with a quick check-in. Basically want to know what you guys think about this question. So if you were to describe sales using an object, an everyday life object, what would you choose? So you can think about it, and if you're ready, you can type in the chat box. How would you describe sales using any everyday object? It can be a very wild imagination, so no worries, but you can just type it freely. Laptop, chocolate, okay, wow. Uh-huh. Sujit, why do you think it's a mirror?
So I was looking at this from the perspective of being a sales representative, and I think every sales pitch that you give, that's like a mirror of some personality of yours, and also a mirror of, I don't know, what you're giving to the offering to the person, right? It's a mirror of, I think it's.
Yeah, I think like it's a mirror of, let's say, your personality as a person, and then you, of course, carry that out as a salesperson when you have your own style of pitching. Wow. Sherlyn, a whole dream of paper. Can you explain a bit?
Maybe this is more like on a sales management perspective, but I think paper has the opportunity to be very like have a high, I would say, like distribution, can reach a lot of people and give a lot of information, stuff like that. Yeah, that's what.
So it's like quite useful and
and
informative.
yeah, it's like
Okay.
standardized. Yeah.
What about Eugene? You said it's the thermometer. Quite interesting.
Because I think when we are talking about sales, what I think of is you need to understand the partner. So like sometimes you even need to identify like is this a cold lead, warm lead, all those. So thermometer is like identifying the temperature to understand what we are going into like that.
Like gauging the temperature of the meeting and understanding the client for sure. Let me see, maybe one more person. What about, is it Laxita? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? So you said it's like a pen. Maybe do you mind explaining why?
Pen, I mean, it is used, I mean, it is essential for anything, but then it can be in many types and you can use it in different ways for depending on the purpose. So sales is exactly just like that, where you can change it in the way you want depending on your purpose, and you can curate it, and even the way you sell it is different. So yeah, that's why.
Exactly. I think all of you guys have pretty interesting analogies. And to be very honest, the first time I really thought deeply about the concept of sales was when I watched a movie called Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not sure you guys have watched or not. Like when I saw Leonardo DiCaprio, like, like calling up the clients and then be like, hey, like, do you want to buy the penny stocks and stuff? And I just felt like that is so intense. Exactly, sell me this pen. So when someone wrote pen, I was going to think about the whole sell me this pen sales simulation. That's actually the first time I heard about sales, and I was quite shocked. Like I never foresee myself in ISEC doing sales at all. Like I was an OGV member and OGV manager, and I thought my life was going to be about taking care of EPs, sending them overseas, and then here am I, like in a company meeting, having to pitch ISEC when to be honest, I don't even know what's happening. So I think that was quite difficult. Like that was a pretty intense experience. And I felt like before I learn more about sales, there's a lot of misconception that I need to break first. Because when I saw Wolf of Wall Street, when I saw the way they sell in Wall Street, like, the intense environment, supposedly you need to make 100 cold calls a day and you need to hard sell to the customer. I was like, really? Like, is this something we need to do in ISEC? And yeah, I mean, it took me a while to realize what you guys just mentioned. Like, it's not about hard selling, but really it's about a mirror and then trying to curate and trying to customize the sales pitch according to the needs of your client. While and for sure, I mean, it's quite challenging. But I think the one thing that I really realized, and I want to start the session by sharing, is people always talk about sales as a numbers game. Like we always look at the funnel, we always look at, okay, like how many prospects do I need to have? Okay, how many deals do I need to close in this month? How much revenue do I need to make in order to break even for a certain event or like for the whole term? I'm sure your MCVP finance or let's say your team in the future would tell you, hey, BD guys, you guys are all about money. You guys are all about like saving the LC, you're saving the MC. So oftentimes it's a lot about numbers, but sales is not just about numbers. It's more about conversion. So instead of just blindly going after, okay, I need to just try as many contacts that I can make, as many companies that I can reach out. The key is to have a much more focused approach and focus on conversion. So even when we're looking at, let's say, the first approach to companies, it's not just like, you close your eyes and you're just randomly like finding any company out there, but you're trying to find a company that can potentially be your buyer. And that's why, not just in the first stage of the funnel, but all throughout, focusing on the conversion part, focusing on optimizing your efforts to make sure that your clients are going through the whole funnel in a smooth way. That's definitely the objective of why we do sales. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover in this session. So first of all, we're going to talk about the basics of sales prospecting. So as you know, like first approach and basically prospecting and reaching out to companies. So we're going to cover a bit on that. And then we're going to talk about like what are the key points to consider while prospecting and also approaching companies. So of course, like everyone knows different channels, different ways to reach out, but then there's some other key considerations and key factors you need to really think about. So that's something we're also going to touch on. And then it's going to be on how to leverage different channels to maximize the response rate of first approach. So there's email, there's cold calling, there's LinkedIn, there's alumni referrals. There are a lot of channels and touch points in which you can reach out to companies. But how can we really maximize the effectiveness of each channel? That's something we're going to briefly look at as well. And finally, we're going to look at some smart prospecting tips, or what I call prospecting hacks that can make you a pro salesperson. So you don't need to worry if it's your first time knowing about sales prospecting. Maybe you don't even know what is prospecting, or maybe for some of you, you're super advanced and super experienced in sales. I'm going to try and make the content accessible for all kinds of people here. And of course, you can feel free to interrupt anytime. And you can ask me any questions or just leave a comment on the chat box. And in the end, I'm going to have a Q&A space as well. So you can feel free to jot down your questions and let me know later if there's anything you'd like to ask or any current struggles you're having when it comes to sales prospecting. And I'm going to try and best to cover that. Okay, so with that, let's move on. So I think when it comes to prospecting, the first question is, what really is prospecting? So I'm sure you would have heard about this word a lot. So if I need to very simply define what is prospecting, I would say it's basically the process of initiating and developing new business. And how do you do that? You do that by finding potential customers, clients, or buyers. So when you're first doing raising, you might only think about, let's say, a certain MNC or a certain company. You might guess that this company may have the budget to sponsor us for a national conference, or this company may have, let's say, hiring needs for which they need to hire global talent solutions to us. So prospecting is the way where you make the first contact, where you reach out to the company to kind of explore potential buyers. So if I need to basically categorize two kinds of prospecting, the most common types that we see, it's outbound and inbound. So outbound prospecting is, let's say, when you reach out to a certain company or a certain lead who hasn't like expressed any interest in your product. So that company has no clue of what you guys are doing. Maybe that company has never really heard about ISEC, or even if they've heard about it, they have never really approached you showing interest. So this is what we oftentimes call as like cold contacting or sending a cold email, where you don't know the person you're sending to before. You just find their contact and you identify the prospect through a platform. Let's say through LinkedIn, you send them a connect request, or let's say on Google, like your different, let's say, websites where you can generate the email addresses of different companies, their representatives, or simply you find their contact online on their website. So you haven't had any conversation or any touch point with them, and you make the first approach. So that is outbound. So as the word suggests, it's outbound. So it's you reaching out to the lead or the company. And the second type is called inbound prospecting. So inbound is when the lead or the company, they kind of make an approach to you. They show an interest in your business or your product. So how it can happen is, for example, they may have approached you on LinkedIn, or they may have viewed your profile, or they may have paid a visit to your website, or maybe even signed up for your newsletter. Simply rely on outbound to always like have a good prospect. And at the same time, if you only rely on inbound prospecting, then you are never going to make new reach outs to companies. So it's a healthy mixture and a healthy combination of both kinds of prospecting. Of course, most sales companies, they would recommend you to do inbound prospecting because it's much easier to convert them, because you're not pitching to someone who is completely aloof and has no clue of what is ISIN, but you're pitching to someone who has shown a certain degree of interest in our organization or our product. But at the same time, outbound is also quite effective if you do it well. So in terms of both kinds of prospecting, the key is really to understand how to maximize the effectiveness of each type, and then see how best you can do both outbound and inbound to boost your prospect. So of course, like these kind of concepts, they may seem easy on paper, but when it comes to practice, especially when it comes to prospecting, it can be very, very tough. Like just finding the contact is not the tough part, but the tough part is being resilient and doing the process time to time, because it doesn't require much thinking or thought process, but rather it requires you to work really, really hard, trying to dig out different accounts, different contacts of companies from different channels. So of course, it's not easy. And when I look back, when I started the term, July last year, it was really, really hard. But throughout the journey, what I realized is prospecting, as much as it's a knowledge or a skill, in the end, it's a lot about mindset. And it's the mindset of conquering all your fears. So just to give you some background of my personal fears then, when I was newly onboarded into the role of BD, even though I did BD in my LCP term in my LC, I was double rolling BD, but doing BD at MC is a completely new ballgame altogether. The playing field is different, and what you're basically working with is totally different. So for sure, it was not easy. And for me, because I don't come from Hong Kong, like I don't speak the same language, so I don't know Chinese, so I don't know, especially when it comes to a lot of local buyers, I don't speak the same language, I don't belong to the same culture. So it's almost like I need to sell in a foreign business environment where I don't really know what's happening, or I don't really understand and grasp what the locals are thinking. When I started the term, there was COVID, right? And I guess the $1 million question for all BD people is always like, how do you sell when no one is willing to buy? So you're trying to sell, you're trying to raise revenue from companies when literally no one has the budget. And like a lot of the rejections you receive, I'm sure, are because of companies saying that, oh, like they need to cut headcount, they don't have any resources, they need to, like separate and have the other priorities and commitments. So the struggle is, even when you're doing prospecting, how do you find the right companies who have some sort of budget to spare when literally the whole industry is broke? And then, to make matters worse, a partner for ISEC Hong Kong, who gave us nearly 65,000 USD the year before, in 1920, that partner ditched in the beginning of the term, saying they have no budget for us. So nearly 70 to 75% of the previous term's revenue, when I start the term in the company meeting, the company says, sorry, we have no budget for this year. So that meant that I had to start from scratch, and the pressure to find new partners was truly enormous. When you lose like literally 70 to 80% of your existing partners' revenue, you need to start from scratch and really make a lot of prospects, reach out to a lot of companies. And of course, like I told you guys previously, it's a pretty frustrating process, isn't it? Like when no one really gives a response back, no one really replies back to your cold email. It can get very frustrating. It can get very demotivating. Like you send out 10 to 15 prospects a month, or even like for me, I used to send out 40 to 50 prospects a month. And then turns out like, no one really gives a shit. Like companies are not really willing to really reach out to you, or they're not even willing to respond to emails. So it was really tough. And not gonna lie, there were a lot of nights where I have nightmares. Like I have dreams about having prospects and BD revenue. So it really messed with my psyche a lot. And I started to become like a robot, thinking just about prospecting all the time. But then I realized that, it's about conquering these fears. It's about realizing that even though the climate is difficult, there are still opportunities waiting to be explored and new sales prospects and companies who are waiting to come in. So of course, it's really hard and it's not easy to get going, but as BD people, that's the resilience that we need to have, so that no matter how many rejections, how many no responses we get, we're still having that mindset of still approaching new companies, still exploring new opportunities to collaborate. So yeah, I think my biggest realization from it all is, of course, like it's the first step of the process, and for sure it's the most restraining. But without it, the entire thing can never go on. That's why it's the first step of the funnel. And of course, if you don't have any prospects to play with, then you won't have buyers in the end and confirmed companies to then partner with as a new entity. So I think the key is really to simplify the process. Even though the whole thing can get very complicated and energy draining, the key is really to understand how to identify good fit customers. So of course, prospecting is mundane and time consuming, but you can make use of your time effectively if you do prospecting in a smart way, where you identify good fit customers. By good fit customers, I mean the right buyers, the potential buyers who may really go on to buy your product or service, so that you don't waste your time chasing the wrong type of companies. So I think first of all, there are some prospecting myths that I want you guys to really question and challenge in yourself. Like these are a lot of misconceptions that I heard in ISEC when it comes to doing prospecting. So the first one I already touched upon. People say it's all about volume. So people say, okay, if I need to have, let's say 100 companies in the end, I need to make like 1,000, 1,500 prospects. But instead of having that approach of just blindly focusing on numbers and volume, I want you guys to approach it in a more strategic perspective and to think about not just volume, but the conversion. Second myth is, people have a stigma towards cold calling. People think that, cold calling is just like those random insurance companies, they call you up saying, hey, you want to buy my insurance? Or those call center employees calling you up. Of course, they are super annoying. And I'm not saying that cold calling is an amazing approach, but it can also be effective if you do it well. And I'm going to cover cold calling towards the later part of the session, because personally, I feel like cold calling, if you use it well, then it can actually be a very smart way of prospecting and converting your leads. So don't always think that cold calling is, very tragic, very difficult, and always drives away buyers, because that's really not the case. Some other people feel like prospecting is too damn time consuming. So after a point, you will always tone down your goals. And then people also think that, hey, scripts are too impersonal. Like, you need to customize everything. Of course, you need to customize. Of course, you need to curate the pitch to the company. But you don't need to always believe that scripts and templates don't work. Because ultimately, if you need to do smart prospecting, you can't sit all day drafting 10 to 15 extremely customized emails. Like you need to have a trade-off. You need to make sure you're using the time well, where you have a certain template and there are certain things you're customizing instead of, let's say, drafting a completely new email to completely new types of companies. And the last part is you're destined to face a hell lot of rejections. So you will, of course, face a lot of rejections and no responses, but I wouldn't say you're destined to face it. And all these like statements here, they're not entirely true. They're not entirely false, but it's just largely myths and misconceptions that I hope you guys can also challenge yourself to think, is this really true? And the first step is to understand that to know more about sales prospecting, you need to understand what are the misconceptions, what are the things that you shouldn't fall into the trap. And you should explore and really understand what is it that we're trying to really understand about prospecting. So like I said, prospecting is not just about finding buyers, but it's about finding the right buyers, the good fit customers, the people who can potentially go down your funnel. And that's why I want you guys to find some time to actually, first of all, start with why. So before we really dig deep into prospecting, you first need to understand, why do you need to find a company? Why do you need to find a prospect? So I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes. You can grab a notebook and a pen with you and try to answer these questions, all these questions. Try to think about as many reasons as you can, as many answers to why. So why do you form partnerships with companies in the first place? Why should companies partner with ISEC? Why should companies pay for engaging with our youth? And so on. So there are 5 questions, and I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes. So you can write down on your notebook, or you can take notes and try your best to answer these questions. And once you're done, we're going to move on to the next parts. So start with why, and your time starts now. Okay, I assume you can. Cool. Okay, so I think just now you guys talk about basically try to brainstorm more about starting with why. And like the essence of like why I want you guys to go through this exercise is I want you guys to understand like why do you need a partner to begin with? Because that's the first step of knowing the why behind prospecting. So it's always doing backward planning. Even though we say prospecting is the first step of the process, it's always about going from backwards to understand, okay, what kind of partnership do I want? Why do I want this kind of partnership? And then accordingly, I find a suitable company to partner. So when it comes to prospecting, when it comes to finding companies for first approach, of course, there are a lot of things you need to keep in mind. But some key questions that you guys might want to ask yourself always is a few of these. So first of all, is the prospect's business and organizational fit? So of course, like let's say according to ER principles of ISEC, we avoid partnering with any companies that have any sort of political agenda, or if they're promoting any kind of discrimination against, let's say, a particular gender, or like, let's say if they're involved in any wrongdoing. Of course, that's a very bare minimum. But going on a more deeper level, is the prospect's business really fitting ISEC? For example, you wouldn't really partner with, let's say, a wine or a beverage company that is selling like alcohol and spirits, right? Because you don't want to promote that from a youth perspective. So that's just an example, but let's say for other companies as well, when it comes to prospecting, you can't just blindly go about chasing any random company, but you need to think about what they're doing and let's say their industry of operation. Does it really align with ISEC in any way? Second thing is, have you identified the key stakeholders? So stakeholders in this case would be, let's say, the representative from the company side. And even in the prospecting phase, you might keep in mind that the person you approach in a company may not be the person who is making the decisions in the end, because it might be the top management, it might be the boss of the partner, the representative who is meeting you. So it's not just about like making sure that person you reach out to or approach for the first time is a stakeholder, but there are other stakeholders down the line at higher levels of the organization that also are involved in the whole process. Thirdly, are the prospects constraints a deal breaker? So constraints in this case would be, let's say, time, budget, and other factors that a company would consider when it comes to partnering with ISEC. So for example, if you already know that a company is really broke and they have absolutely nothing to spend, then potentially prospecting them might just be a deal breaker. So there isn't much point in, really like going after and chasing that kind of company for forming a partnership. For this, do you have familiarity with the prospects market? So for example, in COVID times, you always say, okay, like let's say IT or pharmaceuticals, these are some of the industries that are booming. But then if you, let's say, don't have any partners in there, then you might need to do a lot of background research to first of all understand the market and understand the industry first to see if you can actually prospect the right people in there. So do you really have the familiarity with that particular market? And last but not least, do they have an awareness of our offer? Do the companies that we're trying to make an approach, the partners that we are trying to convert to buyers later on, are they actually aware of what ISIC is doing? Personally, in my experience of doing sales, a lot of the times the companies are really confused. Like even though they checked out our website, they're confused as to, okay, so like I see you guys are doing exchange, but then you find me for a sponsorship for an event. So how does that work? So you need to really explain the structure and give them all the information clearly at a later stage. But even at the prospecting stage, it's important for you to consider, does the company or the prospect actually even have an awareness of what ISIC has to offer, what BD in particular has to offer? So there are, of course, a lot of channels and a lot of different prospecting ways. And this is just some data that I was able to find out from a website, which looks at like how we see the effectiveness of different channels. So of course, like cold calling, among these are the least effective. But then, as I told you before, I'm going to let you know why it's still a good way of doing cold calling. So as you can see, like none of the channels are like barely reaching 50%. Like calling existing clients is 51%, but all the others, their probability of success or their effectiveness is somewhere in between 25 to 30%. Some is just 40%. So of course, like there is no sure shot method. And that's what I want you guys to keep in mind. When it comes to doing the first approach to companies and when it comes to doing sales, there's no one-stop solution. There's no one-size-fits-all solution or method that can help you to really understand, what's the absolutely perfect way of doing prospecting. You really need to not put all your eggs in one basket, but then you really need to spread it out and try a lot. And again, like these are some things you might want to brainstorm. Like, especially when doing sales under the pandemic, especially when it comes to prospecting, of course, it's good that you start with why that we just did before. But at the same time, you also need to think about what are the ways in which sales has changed under COVID? How have buyer-seller relationships transformed? And how can great salespeople still make the most out of the opportunities? And what are the key trends? It's only when you understand the key trends and the market reality of sales under the pandemic when you can actually then do effective prospecting. Because to prospect, it's about identifying potential buyers. And you can only identify the buyers if you're in sync with what's really happening in the market. What kind of companies are growing under the pandemic? What kind of companies are fading away? Which are the companies that we should avoid? What kind of companies may have an interest in partnering with you? Hence, they may potentially become buyers of ISEC. All of this is something you really need to stay in sync with what's happening. And for sure, under COVID-19, things have changed dramatically. But these are, again, important things to consider. So essentially, when it comes to do's and don'ts for prospecting, of course, like there can be a lot of do's and don'ts and a set of to-dos that I can feed you with. But instead, I want you guys to always remember this philosophy. So it's called build, measure, learn. It's actually a concept borrowed from Lean Startup. So it's basically an innovation principle when it comes to like creating a startup idea. But for me, this is a principle that I follow in prospecting and sales. So how does it apply in prospecting is like, thus far I've been telling you that there is no one particular channel that can guarantee results or one particular way of doing prospecting that can always guarantee results. So that's why you always need to try. You always need to be agile. And that's where the loop of build, measure, and learn comes from. So the whole concept is you need to be agile and you need to try new strategies. So you always need to build a small thing and then you need to test it out. So you need to measure if that particular strategy works. And then if it works or doesn't work, you learn from it. If it works, you continue. If it doesn't work, then you pivot and you try another strategy. So rather than always thinking about, okay, should I only cold email or should I only use LinkedIn? You need to be smart and you need to explore new strategies that are out there so that that's going to be effective for you and you know what works and doesn't work. So for example, how do you apply this whole concept? So let's say, what are the things that you can actually play with and test? For example, the text size of an email, the subject of an email, the way you design a proposal, or let's say even trying out, let's say, what kind of companies you're trying to partner with, or does partner connections really work? Does alumni connections really work? These are different kinds of things you can always try to play around with, and you can test it out so that you can have a lot more small and big things that you can really learn from. So it's really about learning by doing and learning by failing. So there's a lot of failures down the line, which you of course realize and you will know what to avoid when it comes to prospecting. But at the same time, the whole process, it can be done only when you really try and experiment and practice. So just to approach the end of our session, I always talk about doing smart prospecting, right? So what are some of the prospecting hacks that you can keep in mind in order to be a pro salesperson? So first one I would say would be to have a focused approach. So instead of just randomly searching for prospects or companies, you need to have a focused approach where it's not just industry specific, but also profile specific. So what I mean by industry specific is, let's say when you do the market research, when you do research on what kind of industries are booming under COVID, what kind of industries are affected, you would understand what kind of companies to find and what kind of companies to avoid. So for example, under COVID, you have IT and e-commerce and pharmaceuticals, they're all booming. While let's say you should definitely avoid like retail, travel, hospitality, because of course those industries are really broke under COVID. So even if you're finding those companies, it would probably have a very high chance of rejection. So it doesn't, really make sense to prospect them all over again. And the second thing is more on profile specific. So what kind of profiles should you approach when it comes to pitching for sponsorships and partnerships for events? So especially on, let's say, corporate communications, on CSR, on public relations, marketing and communication side. And the kind of profiles that you should be looking for, I would say, shouldn't be too junior. For example, don't find officers or executive level. And also don't find too senior people. Like don't find the CEO or managing director or the vice president. For sure, they won't have time or the patience to reply to you. So ideally, the profile is usually manager or assistant manager or senior manager of CSR or corporate communications. And typically, if you focus on these specific industries or these specific profiles, it's going to be much easier for you to get a good chance of maximizing your prospecting outreach. Second one is for cold calling. Now, my strong advice is don't use cold calling to pitch, but use cold calling to simply get a qualified email of a contact point. So what I would do is, I would approach in two ways. So the first one is, if I know the person already, as in I know this person exists and this is the phone number. So I would call the person up and be like, so hi, I'm calling from ISEC. We have a youth empowerment initiative coming up and we want to partner with a company. So could I have an email address to send a proposal? So I would only use the cold call to get the email address and then send them a detailed email with the proposal instead of, randomly cold calling them and be like, oh, we have an event, this is what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. They're probably really busy at work and they don't have much time to really reply. So that's why I use the cold call to get the email. Or let's say when someone hasn't replied to your email, you can then call them up to ask them to be like, hey, I've sent you an email. Do you mind having a look and getting back to me? Just keep the cold call short and sweet. But from my own experience, it's quite effective in pushing the person to actually give you a response, no matter it's on the call or no matter it's on the email by replying to him. The third one is oftentimes I get a lot of questions saying how to dig out email contacts. So a smart way of doing it is actually going to the press releases or media contacts of websites. For a lot of big MNCs, you might notice that, they don't really have qualified contacts available on their website directly. But if you go to the media relations or the press release reports that are uploaded on the website, then you would realize that basically there are like these contacts that are available. So typically the contact of the corporate communications or PR person will always be mentioned on the press release. So it should be something you pay attention to. And then for the fourth one, it's about less is more. So it's about realizing that rather than contacting a lot of companies, you can focus on a small pool of companies. And then like if one person is rejected, you try to find at least 2 others. So the thumb rule that I follow is at least 3 different contact points before I give up and move on to another company during the prospecting phase. So that you're not like looking at 200, 300 MNCs, but let's say you have a batch of 50 MNCs, but you're trying to really get those buyers by trying different approaches. For example, if sustainability department doesn't reply to you, then you can try for PR, you can try for corporate communications, and then they may have a chance of getting back to you. So that might be effective as well. And then the next part is about social selling. So on LinkedIn, it's basically about how do you have a more customer-centric sales approach where you're having a credible profile, you're then engaging with your new connections and connecting with them. You're trying to always communicate in a very friendly way where they're able to understand more about you and more about ISEC and what you're trying to do. So it's just more about networking with companies on your LinkedIn profile and then using it as a chance to pitch your products and also getting their email addresses where you can then follow up with a more detailed proposal. So this is another prospecting hack you can think about. Especially these days, I see a lot of salespeople, they don't simply rely on emails, but they also try to use LinkedIn. So that's why that's also something you can try to approach. And then the last one is about having a routine. So instead of, spending a lot of hours, like it doesn't work to have a 3-hour workspace doing prospecting or raising. Like it might be very, very, very demanding. So I would rather encourage you guys to set relatively more realistic goals. Like the way I do it is this is the kind of routine that I follow. So I would typically do 10 prospects a day for 4 days. And then I would prospect for a week, and the next week I would actually make the approach. So I would do a break for prospecting. And then the next week again, I would do 10 prospects a day for 4 days a week. And then I would again give a break and so on and so forth. So that's a routine that you can come up with. So that's a prospecting hack again that you can keep in mind. So of course, like the thing that I want you to remember is you're human. So, when you mess it up, don't take things personally and beat yourself up. It's important for you to realize that in this process of doing prospecting, you're also going to make a lot of mistakes. For example, when I first started doing prospecting, you can see how bulky my LinkedIn messages or texts are. And of course, that I got criticized by alumni or partners saying like, hey, like at least can you not use an email? Can you make it more personalized? And of course, back then it was like super detrimental for my confidence that, I was being feedback by alumni saying, I shouldn't just copy paste the same message, but I should make it more personalized. So these are things that I didn't know in the beginning, but I learned on the go. And then, for example, like an email where, of course, I didn't really customize, but I really tried to just copy a template. And I didn't even check the person's LinkedIn profile before. And then the person be like, hey, like, if you want to form a partnership, please like spend some time to the profile you're trying to connect to. So people give you direct feedback, and of course it hurts. But the most important thing is like to realize that every mess up is also a learning. Like, like in the process of prospecting, if you're trying to do build, measure, learn, especially when you're trying to come up with new ways of prospecting and trying new things, it's of course going to be tough. But at the same time, you will realize that every mess up is a learning. And that even though you find yourself demotivated, and even though, let's say, the whole thing leads to no results and rejections, it's always about remembering that rejections are always better than no response. So ultimately for prospecting, it's about realizing that your job is to keep pushing for a response instead of being too worried about rejections. Because ultimately, like rejections are part of the game, but if you keep trying hard, if you keep using smart strategies, and if you try your best, then for sure the outcome will still be great in the end. So just something I want to wrap up the session with is, if you're scared of rejection, if you stop trying, then you're not even in the game. Like if you just give up prospecting, if you just give up approaching companies, then you're not gonna even stand a chance of finding a new partner. But if you keep trying, if you keep putting in the effort, then to me, you're best in the game. You don't need to be someone who is super pro, who is super strategic, who knows A to Z about sales. But you just need to have the tenacity to keep trying, the resilience to keep learning from mistakes, and always having the mindset of trying to prospect, trying to find new ways and new approaches to approach companies. And ultimately, for this, you need to have an infinite mindset to excel in the infinite game. So that's mainly what I had to cover in today's session for prospecting. For all the information, you guys can read the output later. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. And yeah, that should be it for now. So see if you guys have any questions or anything you want me to cover, and I can for sure cover it.
Thank you so much. So everyone, I hope you loved it a lot, because it was again an amazing session. I think we can end it with a screenshot, a picture. Let's do it.
Sure.
Amazing.